Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Dynamics Corner, the podcast where we dive deep into all things Microsoft Dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned expert or just starting your journey into the world of Dynamics 365, this is your place to gain insights, learn new tricks, and hear from industry experts. I'm your co-host, Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode was recorded on April 8th, 2024. Kris.
Yeah.
Business Central 2024 Wave 1 was released just last week.
Super exciting, man.
At the time of this recording. It's super exciting. Each update and each wave release is full of information. And with it being full of information, we all need to learn some of this information. Not only that, we need to learn about other pieces of information. And we also need to learn how many people do not like pineapple on their pizza. With us today, we had the opportunity to speak with Alfredo Iorio. Alfredo, hello. Good afternoon.
Hello. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, both. How are you?
Doing very well. How about yourself?
Excellent. I can't complain. It's a nice rainy day in London, as usual.
I was just going to ask that. Isn't it always rainy?
When it happens, it's good news. Yeah.
Well, that's good. I could go for some rain. I think we could use some rain for the grass.
You'd fit in out here in Washington State because it rains often.
Does it, right? Oh, right.
So does it really always rain in London?
Well, not really, but it's a British thing, you know. You are required, and that's something that we might be, might be interesting because, as you know, I'm Italian, and I moved to London about 11 or 12 years ago, and my partner's British, and so she's teaching me how to get into the British world as a proper British citizen. And so it doesn't really, the weather is not really that bad, but it's something you really need to learn to do, right? Complain about the weather. It's almost as if you make a statement about, being humble, right? Because you don't really want to sound too optimistic, which is quite the opposite of what would happen in my culture, right? In Italy, you would say, how are you doing? How are you? And then you would almost always, be welcomed with a nice smile and say, oh, everything is doing exceptionally well. I'm very happy and everything is going well. And people congratulate you, say, oh, well, that's great. Tell me more. But you don't do that in England because you don't want to sound too arrogant, right? Well, things might be, too nice. And so the weather is not that bad, but it's always polite and advisable, say, to start complaining about it. And so here we go.
Travel tip to London #1: complain about the weather.
Complain first.
Very true.
I have yet to visit London. I only visited on TV, and on TV, I learned that London is 50 degrees Fahrenheit,
overcast
and rainy all the time, and always foggy.
It was foggy. Yeah, well, pretty much. Yeah, I would say no, or not always, but yes, that's a standard. I would say yes, I would say so. Yeah.
Does it snow in London?
Rarely. My 10 years here, 11 years, actually 12 years now. 12 years now, maybe a couple of times. And so it's very magical, though, I must say. I mean, there's no in old Victorian streets of London. It's so picturesque. It looks like fairy tale.
That's why I would love to visit Europe, is for the old architecture and the old quaint villages, I guess if you would call them, and the small towns. I like small towns, small roads, quiet, rural. And what I see and what I understand is that's what Europe is like in a lot of places. I'm sure that there are some cities that are large or industrialized or become, commercialized, as I call it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, that's what I see, which is interesting because we're commenting about this. It's also interesting what different cultures or countries think or think about or picture when they hear other countries.
True.
And in doing what we do, we're fortunate enough that we can talk with many individuals from different countries, and we realize that those views are not always what are portrayed on TV.
There's some certain stereotypes for sure, like what you would expect. Yeah.
So it's interesting. Well, Alfredo, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. We really appreciate it. I think the timing of this is as well, because just prior to us recording this episode, Business Central 2024 Wave 1 was released. And I think maybe what we could do is you could tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Of course. Absolutely. No problem at all. So a bit about myself. The toughest question in the job interview, isn't it?
Yes.
But yes. Yeah, but it's true. And it's the right place to start with. So I've been working with Microsoft Business Central for, essentially since the version number 1. Before that, but now my first project was in 2016. So not even 10 years in this world, but I managed to work on a number of projects. Before that, I used to be a supply chain consultant, and before that, work in supply chain management, mainly with fast movement consumer goods, grocery retailers, food manufacturers, wholesalers. And I've always been fascinated by this idea of how goods move from one place to the other. So before that, I spent some time in logistics, working with logistics and warehouses. And in fact, I worked in a warehouse myself for quite a few years. When I was in Italy, one of my first jobs was actually to be a van driver. And I do that, and I say that often when I start a new implementation, or central implementation, when I train users, right? Because the conversation about what are your credentials, right? Who are you coming in this organization? Tell us how to run my business. And so, well, most of us consultants would naturally say, look, well, I got this degree and studied software engineering, right? And I got this technical background, with Microsoft, Oracle, SAP for years. I usually show my driving license, which is still a Class C driving license. This is my credential, I've been, cursing the traffic like you because I know what it's like to be late for a delivery and the restaurant waiting for their suppliers, right? And I know the route is wrong. And when I open my van, the things that I need to pick up are at the back of the van, and then I get mad with the warehouse team, and then also worked in the warehouse, right, for many years. And so that is really what, and I must say, for in my opinion, and apparently also the opinion of someone, my, let's say, clients and colleagues, that's really what made me appreciate software engineering, I would say business applications more, because as I started learning business applications afterwards, and I started learning about how business applications like Microsoft, Business Central handles things like warehouse activities and picking, right, receiving goods, inventory management. I started to connect dots, and really, for whatever reason, I found it really interesting, and I developed a passion for it, and I learned the application quite fast. And so, job after job, project after project, implementation after implementation, ended up being, I decided a few years ago, so you know what, I'm going to be a Microsoft consultant and work on Microsoft business applications, and make it as my profession. And so here we are, a few projects, a few LinkedIn posts, a few blogs and videos. Here we are talking about Business Central with you guys.
Yes.
You said a few. Central. You've been doing a lot.
I've been doing a lot, Christopher. Yeah, well, thank you. It really helps. I mean, first of all, I'm really passionate about that. I really like the idea of sharing, but also like the idea of being on camera, I must say, right? So when I was a teenager, I wanted to be a rock star. And so fun. Awesome. Here in my living room, I got 3 guitars hanging on the wall. So that, as you might have guessed, never managed to become my full-time job.
Do you play?
Yes, I still do play. Yes.
Oh, well, maybe we'll have to have you pull one of those guitars off the wall and play a quick note for us. later on in the conversation.
Yes, yeah, I might. No problem at all.
No, I think that would be great.
Nice gig.
You had mentioned, as Kris had alluded to, you do quite a bit, which is one of the reasons why I was excited to speak with you. And even more so now with Business Central 2024 Wave 1 being released, because with each release, even with the product itself and the updates, as I guess you can call them, because those updates aren't even cumulative updates or what I would call cumulative updates. Those are also additional releases with new features and functionality.
Yes.
How your videos are great instructional videos, and you do a lot with educating individuals how to use the application, point out features of the application, which is what I was interested in talking with you, because I find myself sometimes wondering, how can I keep up with all of these changes? How can I learn some of these changes? What are some strategies and approaches that can be followed or taken to learn some of these changes? But before we get into that conversation, you had mentioned one thing, and you had mentioned you were Italian,
yes.
Which will lead me to ask you, Kris will know, and we've spoken with Giulio and Stefano on a previous episode, and we talked with others as well. Do you enjoy eating pizza?
How can I possibly? I'm not sure how to best answer this question. I mean, it would be really weird if I said no, right? I know that's such a terrible cliche, I must say, but cliches exist for a reason, right?
Yes.
Yes, of course. It's I will say my number 2 favorite, dish. You can guess number 1.
What is number 1?
What for you fit all the you can tick all the boxes.
Pasta?
So, yes, of course, yes.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
Do you like pineapple on your pizza?
I think it's a mortal sin.
Thank you. You and I will get along for the rest of eternity because of that. I myself find that there is no reason why someone should put pineapple on pizza.
No, absolutely. It's like
I want to know who invented that. Like, why would someone try it? Oh, let's just put pineapple on the pizza. Do you drink wine or beer with your pizza?
I enjoy a glass of wine with my pizza. Yes. I don't think that beer and pizza, although it's a sort of a staple, right, go very well together. And I don't know, there must be something about the yeast of the pizza, right, and the carbonated, the I would say, element of the beer. In my opinion, doesn't really go very well. And so back in the days, the typical snack, right, or merenda would be like the homemade bread, some cheese or some cured meat, and a glass of wine. That's what my grandfather would like to eat after a day in the fields, right? He was a farmer. And so I think it's a perfect combination in 2024 to have.
Still is.
Yeah, still is, right?
That is
forever.
I agree with that. I think that pizza and wine are a great combination.
Perfect.
I don't think I ever had, I think I've had, but I don't think I've ever really enjoyed beer and pizza. I think, like you had mentioned, maybe it is the carbonation might make it a little more filling or settling in your stomach. But
is it white wine or red wine with pizza?
Well, it depends on the topping, Christopher. That's a very good question.
Okay.
That way we could make a whole podcast about that. Because do you want to know sort of the cliche? I mean, this is actually true. At the end of this podcast, I can actually share with you the photos that prove that I'm not making this up. A few years ago, because I was working for food companies, because I worked mostly for food companies, I wanted to learn more about baking and pizza making because I had an opportunity to work on a project for a company that would import pizza bases in Europe. And so the company offered me the chance to work and to go back to Italy and spend 5 days in a pizza making school. And so I actually learned to the all the thing and the stretching and using the oven using the paddle, right? And so I actually learned the whole process. So there are photos of me, like actually using paddle and pulling out pizzas from an oven. So going back to the question about white or red, I would say it depends on the topping. So a light pizza with cheese only, white base, like a salty white, chilled and salty, like typical, or say, like southern France or southern Italy. If you have something more meaty, red sauce or something like ham, it was a bit salty, strong, Bordeaux or Chianti would go very well with that.
I'm writing this down. These are great tips.
Those are great tips.
I enjoy making pizza myself. I do that.
Nice.
I make the crust. I haven't graduated to making sauce. I still buy it from the store, but I enjoy picking up different cheeses, trying the different cheeses with the different sauces, and making my own crust in the toppings. But a glass of wine is great.
That's an amazing tip, because I do the same thing, but I'm out here in wine country in the state of Washington. So lots of Italian restaurants out here. And so I'm going to pair it that way. So I appreciate the tip. Yes.
Excellent. Good.
Excellent tips. But to go back to now, I mean, we could talk about pizza, I think, for hours.
Yes.
But to go back to the original conversation, with Business Central, if somebody were new to Business Central, and the reason why I ask you is because you do great, you have a great method of explaining the application, how to use the application, and you have a number of videos and tutorials available, which I spy on myself sometimes too, which is a whole other conversation because it's interesting. Sometimes you don't realize how many people see your content. But what are some strategies that you feel that one should follow if they were looking to learn the application?
That's a great question. I believe that we can differentiate depending on the actual goals. So I typically, let's say, follow two strategies depending on the goal. So goal number one, you are a consultant, right? Or you are a user, and you need to learn the latest features, right? And how to make the best of what you already have. And that requires one strategy. Number two is if you are new to the application, and so you don't really know the system, right? And you want to see, how this applies. So in many of you, the two requires different strategies. So we can start for the first one. Let's say you're a consultant or you're a user, for example, you are very strong with finance module, right? Maybe you've got an accounting background, all about, finance and accounting tools. And so you want to learn more about the system, right? My advice and my approach is start looking at features that are directly linked to what you already do and know. So, for example, in Business Central, one common scenario would be you are a finance user or finance consultant, right? And you want to start working with the supply chain. So trade, inventory, maybe warehouse, right? You don't really want to start with warehousing. And you don't want to start with the warehouse module, because there is a link between the warehouse module and the finance module. In fact, one thing that not many consultants, in fact, still know is that some warehouse activities don't post to the general ledger, right? It's just physical stock, right? So the warehouse module comes with a warehouse ledger entries, right? Which is a sort of a subledger. It is a subledger, not a sort of subledger, right? It's a subledger that comes with, it's not related to the general ledger. So what happens if you want to learn something else about Business Central and you are a finance consultant, you need to link it with what you already know. And so you start with this approach. Approach number one is inventory management, because chances are you already know the ins and outs about inventory costing, inventory valuation, the concept of goods received not invoiced, right? Reevaluating inventory, stock losses, and how the stock loss ends up with the correct value in your income statements, right? Stock adjustment, the concept of landed costs, right? Those are all concepts you're familiar with. And so now you can move to inventory and start looking at, this is how item ledger entry works. This is what value entries do, right? This is the source code. And you start working, and start expanding the knowledge and say, oh, that's what it means, right? This is how my goods received and invoice work. This is how my inventory updates, right? And so you already have a correspondence to what happens to your balance sheet when you move inventory. And so you start linking it. There's something about the human brain that it's the ability to store and retain information if those are linked to each other. And so the counter argument, when I got into this argument with my clients and also my colleagues, is always the same. Well, actually, it's a lot of things that I need to know, right? And so why can't you just show me the warehouse module? Because I want to learn warehousing, right? And why do I need to learn inventory? Because it's too much to learn, right? And so I say, look, let me give you an example. If you are old enough like me, right, if you're gray hair, you may remember when we didn't have cell phones, right, mobile phones. And so there was a time where we had to use the actual, box and actually key in, right, the phone number of our friends, right?
I remember
Maybe
that.
relatives remember that, right? And so if I ask you to tell me what was your phone number at home when you were 13 or 14, chances are you do remember the phone number. I do remember the phone number of my first that I used to do when I was 14. I still remember my grandmother's phone number. I used to call
Yes.
her because mom would tell you, my mother would tell you, Alfredo, call grandma because I need to talk to her. And I know that mom, there we go. Mom wants to talk to you, right? But I have no idea. I don't know my mother's mobile number. I just don't know because it's just a click, right?
Yes.
And so
That
right,
is true.
If I were to lose my cell phone or my calendar, I wouldn't know anybody's number.
Yeah,
like I don't know my kid's number. I don't know anybody's. It's strange because I'm a little old like you.
Right.
Older, I should say. Older. I'm sorry. And the same thing is you had to remember everyone's number because you only had the phone, and out in the wild, I guess you could say, you had to use the pay telephones on the corner if you wanted to call someone for a ride to be picked up,
Precisely
or
that.
if you didn't have a telephone, because not everybody had a telephone in their home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's how it works. And so, what is the reason why we could remember such a long string of numbers? Because it was quite a lot to remember, right? There's 5, 6, 8 digits. And so the reason why is because we would associate the first 2 or 3 digits to the area, was the area code, right? The other digits were probably the district, right? The few houses around us. And the last 2 or 3 digits was the actual house. And so linking all these concepts, right? The first 2 digits with my country code, the second digit to the area, the third digit to the house, that was allowed us to remember so many phone numbers, right? And so the concept is really, for a business application, it's really the same. The more you can link what you learn to things that you already know, the better it is, the easier it is for you to actually grasp the concept. And so going back to the example before, right? A finance expert or an accountant working with them who wants to learn more about Business Central, I would say, look at inventory management first, the trade, right, the supply chain. Then once you understand warehouse, inventory movements, then maybe you can look at the planning engine. How do you go from a demand, which comes from sales orders and sales forecasts? Again, if you are a finance consultant, you understand this concept, right? Sales budgets and stuff like that. And so replenishment, policies and ordering and transfer and SKUs, right? And so you expand it. And then at the end, of course, warehouse, because then you have inventory, and it's one, let's say record, right? Item ledger entry, 50 items, and then you got a bin content, right? So 50 in total, 20 are on that shelf, 30 are on the other shelf. How do we move it from one shelf to the other? And so this is really the strategy number 1. So the point number 2, goal number 2, you are completely new, right? And so you need to learn the application, but you never really use the application. You use Oracle, maybe SAP. So mistakes most people make is that they want to try to see the same features, right? And say, can your system, you hear questions like, can I run a report that does that? Right?
Yeah.
And so can I run a report like that? Is really, and as a functional consultant, I usually say, well, maybe. Let me ask you a question. What do you want to see in the report? Why do you use the report?
Great questions.
And this is really what really you need to do, right? Why do you need that? Well, I need to see my data in that way. Okay, what will that give to you? What action do you take after you read the data in your report, right? Well, I need that. I know who I can prioritize. And for example, if I need to process a vendor payment. And so you end up, okay, but you want the application, you want insights or information about your aged payables, against your cash, and so you want to make sure you pay your suppliers, right, while keeping your cash flow stable. You wouldn't end up using all the money in the bank account to pay it, right? So there might be a report for that, but instead of running a report, you want to look at this, right? And so let's look at the project process overall. As I said before, right? Let's go before we can talk about the report. How do you plan your vendor payments? Do you manage? Do you work on a aged payables report? Do you have cash flow constraints when you need to balance cash flow and vendor payments? And so we end up with a process, with a picture of the process that describes what people do and the purpose of what they do. And so at the end of this picture that we create together with the user, then I have a story to tell, right? And say, okay, let me tell you how it works. And so it's learning through stories, right? Which is the oldest way that the human race used to teach, right? Before even we invented, we learned how to write. It was the father to son, right? The eldest, in the village, telling stories, because we can associate, right, movements and pictures, and so this is really my. Sorry for the very long answer.
No, it's a great answer because
great
it
answer,
is.
yes.
You're covering so many key points. It's not only for implementation or learning or anything. It's a matter of understanding sometimes why you're doing something, and also when you reference the telephone, it's the association. You learn by association, and that's where they talk. I read an interesting article on card counters at the casino. And they talked about how some of the strategies are just associating cards with things in your house, because that's like what you can picture and see, versus trying to memorize, was it a queen? Was it a jack? Was it a 10? It's okay. Well, I'm familiar with my living room. I have something on the wall. I took it off. Okay. Now that's not there anymore. So now that was the 10. It's just, the association is a great way to learn.
Yeah. I wanted to make a point because Alfredo, you made a great point about being a good consultant and asking those questions in return, asking the why and what your expected results. And number two, I think that's almost you had mentioned about stories, telling stories for people to learn. I think that's almost a lost practice when it comes to consulting, because a lot of times you end up telling stories that allows the user to easily grasp and understand if you tell a story, rather than getting too technical about this is how you do it, click this button. But they don't, it's harder for them to connect when you're not telling the story of why you need to do this, because here's what it would happen. And you're showing examples. I appreciate you pointing that out, because it is a lost practice, as I've noticed.
It is. You're right. Yes, it might be a number of reasons. It's just time changes, and of course we have different tools now. So there was a time where knowledge was scarce. Okay, scarce. I'm not sure about the pronunciation anyway. Scarce. Oh, thank you. No, scarce is a different thing. Scarce. So rare, right? So unavailable, and so knowledge was only the domain of those who could afford to study and to learn. First of all, the actual tools, right, the resources were very precious, like books, and of course time was very precious. You either spend 6 hours on a book, or you spend 6 hours on the fields. And 100 years ago, the vast majority of the world population, right, had to spend 6 hours on the fields if you wanted to eat. And so there was a luxury, right, to learn. And so which means we paid so much attention, and there was a structure in universities, and the elders and those with the knowledge, right? And you study in a school, you have a sort of small community, right? There is a nice film about an Italian poet that I watched the other day, and he was essentially, he didn't go to school because he learned with his father, who was an intellectual at the time, talking about 1800. But the film shows how the father teaching the son, and there was the preacher, right, and there were other intellectuals, right. So there was a community, helping. Now what happened? Internet has changed everything. Right, internet has commoditized the knowledge. Yes, exactly. But full knowledge is really, it changes everything, because now knowledge is a commodity. It's no longer, something so valuable and precious. I can go online and find an Harvard course curriculum, right? And so, but that doesn't mean that I can graduate, right? Because that's the missing link. This is what people don't understand. The fact that I can access a huge catalog of learning doesn't mean that I can just sit in front of my computer alone in my room, and after a couple of years, I'm the best. I'm an engineer. Hire me, right? So that part is really because how to digest information, right, and how to translate knowledge into wisdom. That's the part that is missing. And again, I'm diverging here, but it's a subject I'm really passionate about. So,
No, it's a great conversation. We can talk about this. It's interesting.
Right.
It's all part of learning, which is
It is, right.
One of the things. I don't even like to use the word things, but it's one of the what should I use? Things. It's one of the points that I admire about the content that you have. It's all learning based, and you do a great job with helping others learn. So to me, we want to talk about Business Central, but
Thanks.
it's still part of the process of learning.
Of course. Yes, it is. It is. Yes. Awesome.
So strategy number 1 was to link with what you already know.
Yes.
And you had a second strategy.
Yeah, the second strategy is really about the what I was saying just now. So trying to tell a story and trying to teach by telling a story. And for a user who doesn't know Business Central and wants to start learning a new business application, that can probably apply to all sorts of business applications, right? It's again telling the story, and the story for a business application is really the key. It's in the first word, and I believe that there is a good reason why Microsoft didn't call the stack applications for business, right? But they call it business applications, because business is the first word and it's the most important. Business is the most important element of a business application, which means a business process, right? We don't buy technology for the sake of buying technology, and those who do that make a terrible mistake. It was probably my second implementation, now 2018, where the CFO says we want the best ERP in the market. Is Microsoft at the time was now the best in the market? And I said, why do you want the best in the market? Why do you want to? Then I understood that the company wasn't using their own money, but it was using investors' money. And that's why I like working with small and medium enterprises, right? That's another set of conversation. I love working with SMB. I love working with founders when it's my money. My name is in this company. So you never hear from a founder who put his own money in the business say, I want the best in the market. So I want what they will say, I want what works for me. I want something that my users can use, can work with, and to solve a problem. Show me how your application solves a problem. That's the right question. When the others say, I want the best in the market, well, of course, you're not paying for it. So, but anyway, so going back to the main point, really, it's really about understanding the story. So don't try to learn a new application starting from, let me see how the 365 supply chain management handles license plating. And what are the difference between license plating in D365 supply chain management and Business Central package tracking? Because then you end up in lots of so much complexity, right? That we can spend a couple of hours going through that, and then a week later you forgot. Unless we start, we create a story. So let me tell you how license plating works, right? So imagine a lorry, right, that arrives. Imagine a pallet, right, all wrapped up, lots of boxes in it, right? Each box is an item. And then you got this giant label on this pallet with a barcode, right? The forklift driver gets the pallet out of the lorry, and someone needs to tell me what's in that pallet. What would you do? Well, I open the pallet, start counting box by box and so on. So what if there was a link between a huge number on that pallet and all the boxes with all the goods in it? And maybe That includes the expiry date of the product if it's cheese, right? It includes the vendor number and the product and the purchase order number. Would it be amazing? Okay, that's license plate. Now you can tell, right? You will probably remember the story of the lorry and the cheese of the forklift driver.
That's why I'm
next month.
grinning. I'm excited
Yes.
because
Right?
as you were explaining that, I
Yeah.
could picture
Yeah.
a person
Yeah.
looking at a box with a number, figuring out what they need to do or the questions they had. I could also imagine the truck with the box,
Yeah.
it coming off and putting it on the in the warehouse dock. Like I had this big picture of a process or a story.
Yeah.
And then now I think if I could associate, I understand the concept. Now it's how do I associate Business Central or
Business
supply
Central,
chain
yes.
management to do that. And I think I would remember it easier instead of
Right.
step 1, step
Yeah.
2, step 3,
Yeah,
step 4.
exactly. A page and code and ID and lookup fields. But if I start from that, I mean, it would just be information overload, as they say, right? And so going back to the main question, really, this is it. In my opinion, the best way of approaching that problem. And so business processes, right? Telling stories, and then associating requirements and needs, right, and challenges. And then at the end of it, then you have the business application, right? So let me show you how that number on that pallet looks like in the central. Let me show you how you can go from one number to all the purchase lines, and then if you want to, we can talk about table, purchase header, purchase line, item tracking, tracing, right? All this kind of stuff that they want to look at. At that stage, then it's a lot easier, right, to link actually to learn the functionality, because again, you will have that picture in mind about the challenge of the forklift driver or someone in the warehouse trying to identify that. Again, maybe it's because of my background, maybe because I remember when maybe 25 years ago, I was there. And I know exactly what's it like to have a van driver showing up at your warehouse saying, "Guys, I got this one. It's yours. Here's the paperwork. Sorry, I need to go." And then you end up with this. And now what am I going to do? I got this paperwork that make no sense to me, and I got 200 small boxes to open. It's a nightmare. Would it be awesome if I had a screen? Now, 25 years ago, I didn't have the luxury to do that. And so it was a paper and pen. But now I can relate, right? And so they're really healthy. That's how I ended up, using this method, and it's working. It's working. So because I'm getting good feedback, and it's really what I use today. Yeah.
I think it's a great strategy because, as I had mentioned, I can picture and I would remember what you were showing me because I could picture the story. You mentioned information overload. You mentioned that the internet has everything. Knowledge is a commodity.
Yeah.
So we take the training of learning. So we have the strategy of telling a story as well as linking with what we already know. Now we get to the point, or another question of, how do I find the best source of information for me to learn without having that information overload, and to even maybe possibly minimize the impact of having too much information, as well as validating that it is the best information or the right information?
I will give you an answer, but I'm not sure that you or your viewers will like it. Because if you really want to get to the best source of information, where you avoid information overload, ensuring the quality of the information is right, and ensuring that the information that you get really fills a gap, you cannot use commoditized information for that. Because on the internet, even on the Microsoft website, unfortunately, which is great for a number of things, but it's just too much. And so and it's too generic. It's designed to do that, right? So if you really ask me the best source of knowledge to avoid information overload and to fill the gap, ensuring that the quality is high standard, I would say work with a mentor. That's the best way. If it read the best, it might be not the most economical, right? It must be difficult to find because mentors and senior consultants don't have much time. Of course, that's the problem with all consultancies, and we can talk about a couple of examples if you want to. But really, that is the best. That is still in 2024, in the age of internet, in the age of large language models, because the large language model will return the same answer to everybody who asks the same question, but they will have different requirements, different needs, right? And so even in the age of AI, a mentor will probably be, is still, in my opinion today, the best. The mentor will tell you, look, let me show you how you can use it. The mentor will ask you good quality questions, something that online you don't find, because the internet just regurgitates on you what you search, right? It would be awesome if Google or Bing says, are you sure you really want to ask me that question? Maybe at some point that is going to happen, right? I would love to see that, but it's not really happening. So a mentor will tell you, like in the story, let me tell you how I solved a similar problem 5 years ago on a similar project. And then you spend 20 minutes talking to this mentor, looking at the screen. And that is, my opinion, is the best way.
That's why when you ask online or you search for something, they're not going to ask you why you've been asking me that, right?
Correct.
A person that's a consultant or a mentor, like you said, would ask you, why are you even searching? Can you tell me what you're trying to do?
It has to be a quality consultant or a quality mentor. And I agree with what you're saying, because in the days of information overload, as I'll call it, it's hard to extract all of the noise and bring it all together with what you need without creating the sense of, if you go into like analysis paralysis, to the state of inability to move forward, because now you have so much information. You may search one way, you may search another way. Now you get two pieces of information. You try to blend them together to have one source of information, right? Yeah, by taking multiple sources, consolidate them, and bring them down to one piece of information. You mentioned the point of economical. Define economical, because it's, I remember working with someone in an implementation, and they talked about, well, we have two people that I pay $5 an hour. Go back again. I'm a little bit older like you, and $5 per hour was a lot of money. And then they had one person that could do engineering for $15, and they wanted to hire two people at $5, thinking they were spending $10 per hour. But those two people were not qualified, and it took them longer. So on the surface, it looked like it was cheaper. But in the long run, having the quality mentor or the experienced individual perform the task can save you money.
Yes.
Because they have the experience, they have the knowledge, they have the tools, or whatever they may bring with you. So it's not always the cost per unit.
Correct.
To me, it's the overall cost over time.
That's true. That's a really good point. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And one thing too, like we always say, as a good consultant, you have to learn how to say no, right? Those tools are gonna tell you like, no, don't do that, right? They're just gonna say, yeah, do it this way. So
yeah, exactly. That's very true. And then what you said, it's very important about cost and economical factor, because knowledge and expertise. It's one you might say it's a cliche. It's always an investment, right? Everybody says that knowledge and expertise is always an investment. It's a cliche, but I would add something to that. Knowledge and expertise don't stack. And this is something that a colleague helped me understand a few months ago, which means as an execution of work stacks, right? You can stack execution of work. So you've got UAT, for example, right? And you need to go through 50 test cases, right? If you add more users, right, you can go through 50 users, one UAT test case a day, right? One day, 50 users working together. In one day, you're going through a UAT. Wonderful. So execution can stack. But knowledge and expertise and creativity, because functional consultant in particular, it's almost in a way it's creative work, right? So trying to understand the actual requirement, coming through a solution, brainstorming, back and forwards, right? It's sort of a creative work. That doesn't stack, which means you cannot put in a project 3 consultants with no experience of a certain module, right, or with a little experience, right, and expect to get the quality, to stack the quality. You cannot, right? So a friend of mine make an example, make me an example of a building, right? Let's say we need to build a beautiful building. And so we got lots of workers, bricklayers, right, and engineers. And so more resources, the easier it is, the faster it will be to create this, to put together this beautiful building. However, you cannot hire more architects and expect to see the design of the building to improve in terms of quality, right? So 50 architects would not be able to create a beautiful building if they just don't have the quality, right? But one architect who's the best architect in the world alone can just put together a sketch and make something so unique, right? And because, again, creative work doesn't stack. And so because creative work doesn't stack, you cannot really have an economic advantage. You cannot take shortcuts, right? Again, you cannot get information, unstructured information from the internet and expect to become an expert. It's something that can only, because again, it doesn't stack. So you need to work with somebody else, right? You need to work with the best architects in the world if you want to learn how to design buildings that stand the test of time and the future generations, right? Working. Oh, the Empire State Building. Wow, beautiful still today, right? And so that's really, my idea behind good quality training and good quality, learning opportunities, right? Find someone who knows that stuff.
No, it is important. It is, and it reminds me of many scenarios that I had learned with that too. The Mythical Man month was a book that was written, was similar with Project Man, a similar process that you had mentioned. It's, you can't, you throw individuals at a project. It doesn't necessarily mean that it will get completed faster.
Yeah.
Sometimes by doing that, you create complexity and even more time, because now you add channels of communication, you add other points of failure because you have many people involved. So it goes along with the time. With these are great strategies and great analogies and stories. And I'm excited. I'm learning a lot, and I want to share this with everybody because I have these conversations, and the way that you're explaining it is really picturesque because I'm visualizing this in my mind. With the information overload, and also now take it back to Business Central with the new features. We talked about linking. We talked about the story, and then also the process of working with a mentor, which I do like that process, as you had mentioned, because it helps you curate the information to give you down to filter what you need. But now if you had someone who was a mentor or someone who was in that position to be knowledgeable, because they have the experience of the history, they don't have experience of future, but there are new features and functionality that are added to the application. How would someone like that keep up? Because it's a never-ending cycle in that sense. Because if you learn from a mentor, the mentor needs to learn from a mentor. The mentor needs to learn from a mentor. So where is the point, and how would someone who is a mentor, put it at the top, be able to curate the information to get what they need? In this rapid world.
Yes, I had this conversation with an ex-colleague a few weeks ago, because if knowledge is
he an ex-colleague because the conversation went poorly, or ex-colleague?
No, ex-colleague because he decided to become a freelancer, to be a freelancer. Okay. So we don't work in the same organization anymore, right? So
I have very bad jokes, by the way. I don't know if you understand. It's my sarcasm. I'm sorry.
And I'm terrible at really understanding jokes, but my sense of humor is non-existent, and so.
See, I thought that was funny. That was a joke.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. Excellent. So going back to the point, where do we start? If knowledge is always, shared, where do we get new invention, new opportunities, right? How do we apply? Microsoft releases a new version, Business Central. They introduce sustainability module. There we go. In my opinion, the biggest, let's say feature.
Yeah. First new feature added in many years, 2024 Wave 1.
Yeah, exactly. And so sustainability module, how do we use it? I was at the conference at Directions for Partner UK, and they were showing one of the presenters was showing the sustainability module, and it was quite about, I'm not quite sure whether I should really use it in this way or in that way. So the problem with innovation is that we believe the innovation is always, in a way, create something new, and so there is always an opportunity, right, to capitalize on that. But the thing is that innovation almost always fails, and there is a reason for that, because being creative is very difficult. As a product design, a product owner of Microsoft has got a very difficult job, right? The product owner needs to get all this kind of requests. And if you could, there is a website, right, where suggestions, you can suggest to Microsoft about features, and you will see that there are hundreds of thousands of requests. And the problem with all these requests is that 99.99% of these are just useless, right? And that's the problem with creative work. And it's the same reason why 99% of new music is terrible music. 99% of new art is terrible art, right? And still we have the old musicians releasing a hit, and my God, that's a wonderful song, right? Or these amazing painters making a paint, and the best of the best, because creativity almost always fades. So what do you need to get? Where am I getting there with this analogy? Is that you have these a situation where there are new features and there is no knowledge about how to use it. Well, you need a visionary. You need someone who's got that kind of creativity, has got the courage and the time to say, you know what, I got an idea for this new feature. I think I can use it in 10 different ways. Now, chances are 9 of these will probably fail and will not apply to it, right? And maybe that sparks maybe the next release, right? But maybe one of that actually works. And so you need in your organization, and if you're doing creative work in new product development, research and development, product owner for Microsoft who creates new software, you need that kind of resource. You need that kind of people. I'm not like that. I cannot create. I'm not creative, right? I need a framework. I can develop a framework, right? But I need clear objectives, clear goals, and I will find a way, right? My partner, for example, she's very creative. And she can come up with 10 different ideas about new things for aesthetics, like how to maybe to decorate the flat, right? Or how to help me match a shirt and a tie. She's very creative, right? But her way of thinking is very different than mine. And so you need in an organization this kind of people. You need someone who can very creative, say, oh, there is a new field here, there is a new page. Maybe I can use it for this way. Let me try. Go and try. Run a few tests. Fail. That doesn't work like that, right? You need someone with the courage and the grit to say, I will try again. I will try something else. Eventually, if you have a pool of people, large enough, who is happy to fail 99% of the time, eventually you end up saying, you know what? That's how I can use it. Let me show you how it works. And then someone else will say, oh, actually, you know what? That's great because that can solve a problem that I had for my past project. And there we go. And then you start creating on this one. So, yes, that kind of, in my opinion, that kind of, visionary creative role is something that you need. And if you all work for a Business Central practice, you really want to have 1 or 2 consultants who can do that, because those are the ones who come up with new ideas, and they can capitalize, and push your practice forward. And I see many organizations where consultants are just less. Don't do that, and just they know what they know, and they never grow, and eventually they'll be left behind, which is a shame. Again, I talk too much. Sorry, but
no, you don't talk at all.
It's awesome.
The information that you're sharing is wonderful information, and it's practical and it's relative, because even as I had mentioned, just with the stories of the learning, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm picturing what you're saying, and as you're talking, I'm also applying it to what I see in day-to-day life. I get to speak with many Business Central consultants, many Business Central partners, as well as many end users. And I can see where some of the struggles are and how this type of philosophy can help solve that problem. And I think sometimes it's maybe those that aren't creative that make the decision have to also be able to picture how something like this can work, because everyone thinks now information's on the internet, just go find it. But you also picked up a point, and you didn't, you mentioned a point and I picked up from it. You talked about your partner being able to match your shirt and your tie.
Yes.
Because you don't think like that.
Yes.
That is an important point that everyone needs to realize and remember, that not everybody's good at the same thing. Or when I use the word good, again, I have to try to be nice and polite, but sometimes I say forget it. But not everybody's capable of doing the same tasks. Not everybody's capable of doing everything. So it's also important to find, and if you're from a business management point of view, to find those individuals that are working with you, for you, however you'd like to say it, to where they're in the position where they could be successful and capitalize on what they do well. And also yourself have the reality of, this is something that I do well, and this is what I will do. Because if you do well, you get a lot of fulfillment out of it as well. You can feel good about what you do and what you deliver. So that is a key point from it.
And you made a good point about it just takes one seed. It'll sprout in different ways.
Yes. That's exactly right. It. The seeds will grow, the trees, as they say. Well, Alfredo, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Oh, I still have a question to ask. Hold on. What is the a horror story, or a horror story?
Oh,
but
yes.
A difficult project you've ever been involved?
The most difficult project I've ever been involved. Yes, now 2018. Food service company here in East London. My second project, and it was very difficult for a number of reasons. The company went through a disastrous SAP implementation. And it was too much for them, too complex, too expensive. And now they wanted this. They wanted NAV. The parent company implemented NAV, and I helped them. It was my first project, and it went very well because I was part of the team, of the supply chain management team. So the project went well. A year and a half, very complex distribution, multi-sites. We really pushed NAV to its limit. And so next project, okay, Alfredo, you delivered a wonderful project for our company. Now deliver this project for the other company, which is a lot smaller. And it's going to be a lot easier. And that is the reason why the project became a nightmare. And because, number one, the team thought that I was the expert who could solve all their problems with a wonderful application that would solve all their problems. And so they didn't think of spending too much time in actually doing the work. But my problem was that I also believed that. I'm going to solve all your problems, and this application does wonders, and you can't really give me the requirements. Don't worry, I'll figure something out. You didn't have time to go through UAT? No problem, I'm going to do it for you. A few months later, and days we would start at 5 a.m. and end at 10 in the evening, no joking. I end up with almost a breakdown. Like I just couldn't really, stand the depression because I was doing all the work, and of course the project slipped because we were very close to to the deadline, and the team said, "Well, is this thing happening? I mean, we've been busy doing other things, but are we still doing it?" And so there was no communication, and the expectations we were completely misaligned with the expectations. And of course, I let, let's say, my ego prevail, and that really ended up, turning the project into a nightmare. I got to the point where I just couldn't really work anymore. I remember one day, it was a Sunday. This was a 7 days a week project. 12 hours, 14 hours, eventually. One Sunday morning, I remember telling my partner, I just can't go to work today. I just can't. I mean, I'm so tired, I cannot really walk out of the door. I remember calling in, a bit of chaos. At the time, the Microsoft partner, a very reputable partner in the UK. I'm still in touch with them, still friends, we still work together occasionally. the project manager of that company and the senior consultant saying, Alfred, we understand the project is in a difficult position. Let us help you. And they took ownership of the project, and eventually they lost a couple of months. They went live fine. I took a good 3 or 4 months, like a long break to recover. And then after that, I went back to my consulting, being a consultant. Big lesson learned. The biggest, probably most important lesson learned. A business application project is not a one person's job. It can never be. It doesn't matter how good you are. You can be the number one consultant. You can be the one who writes Business Central code, right? You can be that person. You cannot get a company to transform the way they work without having the team involved.
Absolutely.
And so that was really the most challenging project, really.
Well, thank you for sharing that story with us. There are a number of lessons in there, and you had mentioned, you talked about ego, and that's an important thing sometimes, that it is okay to realize, one, that you need help. That's an important thing, and it's okay to need help. And also, it's okay to not know everything and to need help with that too. So those are some important lessons from that. I'm glad to hear that both the customer went well with the implementation, that you had the partner to be able to support you, to help you in that. That was something that, some people could turn that around to be something negative, but it sounds from your story that it turned positive, and you were able to learn from that lesson and continue to do some of the great things that you do today.
Yes.
Which now, Kris, I can say, Alfredo, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. We truly value your time. Time is the currency of life. It's once you spend it, you can't get it back. So any moment that anybody spends with us and with me and with Kris, we value that time because that's something that you're giving to us. But how can someone get a hold of you to learn more about some of the services that you provide, to see some of the training or videos or sessions that you offer, and some of the other great things that you do within the community? Or I'll throw this in there, just to have some great conversations like we've had today. I could literally talk to you for days, I think, about some of these key points.
I think we definitely can. I really appreciate your time also. So I had great fun, and as you said, we can probably talk about the things on a number of subjects, including wine and pizza combinations and guitar playing. But anyway, if people want to get in touch with me, of course, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, as you know, and my blog is d365training.com. My website will have my blogs and my videos, and I occasionally run a few Business Central boot camps or training sessions. I got lots of free training content online anyway, and so I'm always happy to talk and to connect with other fellow Business Central or business applications enthusiasts in general.
Great, thank you very much. We'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile and the 365training.com website on the show notes. And again, thank you for your time, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the rainy afternoon.
Thank you, Alfredo.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Nice
Have a good afternoon. Ciao, ciao.
You too.
Ciao. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is Matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.